All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Line Your Own Pockets. If you hear a little frustration in Dave's voice, we were experiencing some technical problems, so I like just to bring you guys in on that. But I think we figured out we had to go to a whole new computer, but we don't want to miss an episode for you guys. Now, we talk a lot on this podcast about automating things, about systematizing things. It's kind of the whole point. It's kind of what we're doing a lot on. But in this episode, we're actually going to take a big step back and we're going to talk about what not to automate. Like, at what point should you force yourself to get in there and get your hands dirty and dig the ditch yourself, as opposed to getting a machine to do it for you. And Dave's got some perfect examples to get you started with. And I think I'll be able to add a couple more when he's done there.
Yeah, it's something that I've changed my mind about over the years. I mean, I know there's a lot of developers in that listen to this show,
Mm.
and the tendency among developers is if you can automate it, it should be automated. But I've found over the years that that's not always the best thing to do, and certainly in a trading business. And so here's an example of what I came across that made me change the way I think about it. Um, so as you know, I started the first online trading journal many years ago. It was a product called Stock Ticker. When I created that, I knew it was what I needed to trade well, and I created an API with it to send my trades directly to my journal from the trading apps I was using.
Mm-hmm.
So it would capture a lot of basically all the information I needed was captured automatically as I made the trades. So, the tags that were being applied for the specific systems, the the entry price, the exit price, number of shares, even stuff like the entry slippage and the exit slippage. I would send the signal price, do the calculation based on that in the API. So all that stuff was done automatically, and I thought, well, yeah, this is great. This is the way it should be, and it was nice, right? You would never have to enter trades manually or even look at it. So time goes by. Stock Ticker got bought by Trade Ideas. We eventually spun down Stock Ticker, and I converted my journal over to TraderView, which has an API. But at the time when I did it, I was too busy doing other things. I didn't have time to automate the stuff that I had in place. So
Mm-hmm.
I did the first step towards that. I don't enter trades manually, but I've got a script that I wrote that just copies everything to a clipboard, formats it in the right way, and then it's right there for me to paste in exactly the right format into TraderView. So it's not quite automated, but there's some conveniences there. But I still have to actually go do that every day. So I had this what I thought was going to be an interim step towards full automation, and it's been months and months that have gone by. And what I realized is this is actually a better way to do it, even though I have to do some manual steps, because the automation I had set up before was you know, it didn't force me to look at it every day. I just knew it was happening automatically.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of value in going back and doing that review, having these, very, bite-sized manual steps that you have to do. There's a lot of value in actually doing that and internalizing what's going on and really getting a good review of what your trading actually did that day.
So yeah, the main benefit, kind of from that story, isn't necessarily that doing the thing manually was the ticket. It was the fact that it forced you to go back and look at the data. So, the same result could have been achieved if you had an automated system, but you went back to do it. But you're just not going to do that as much. It's going to be easier in your brain to say, I'll skip a day. Everything's handled. I don't really need to worry too much about it. I can kind of go from there. So what you're saying is that kind of pulling yourself and forcing yourself to do the work, or else knowing that something is going to be missing, that really really kind of made you learn some things about your system and to keep up on it way better than, again, if you just said, I can skip a day, and the day turns into a week and a week turns into a month and that kind of thing.
Exactly. So, yeah, having that strict delineator of, okay, I got to do this today or it's not going to get done. So that's just by its nature a part of your trading day that you have to do. And as part of that, you get a lot of insights that you might not otherwise see. So it's a really, you know, I do this get systematic roadmap for traders, and that's a big thing of what I include in there is getting your daily trading review dialed in that puts you in the right position to notice the unusual things to create systems from. So it's a really important thing. And there's a lot, that part can't be automated and you don't want that automated.
So, just to go deeper into the whole journal thing before we think of kind of other areas that we could probably do the same kind of benefit from. Um, One of the things that I think it'd be impossible to automate is journaling more about kind of the internal, without getting too woo woo, about how you were thinking or feeling, or if you intervened in a system and why, and all of these things that aren't quantifiable, right? So, hey, I broke my rules today, and this was why, right? And you could just as very easily upload something and put a tag on, call it a rogue trade or something, and move on. But I think that kind of the whole writing aspect of doing a journal, I think, is something that shouldn't be looked at or shouldn't be automated in some kind of way. Can you think of anything else from the journal side of things, just alone before looking anywhere else, that, reasons that it would make sense, or things that you should add to that kind of journaling exercise that a human should do and you shouldn't let a computer get anywhere near?
Yeah. So you're totally right that the process of recognizing what happened and the nuances of what happened during the trading day, you're not going to remember that even tomorrow morning,
Hmm.
much less, once a week.
Right.
So it really needs to be a daily process because at the end of the trading day, when you're reflecting back, that's the point where you're going to have it's going to be the freshest in your mind. You want to capture everything about what happened that could be important that you want to keep track of and be able to reflect back on, months from now. So it's good to document it right then. Otherwise, it's just going to be gone, and those valuable nuances that you want to keep track of are going to be gone.
Hmm. And that's the yeah, I can't stress that enough. Especially now, we're talking a lot to systematic traders, but I remember when I would purely discretionarily day trade for a living. By the time I got home, I couldn't tell you what happened. Right? It was like you just felt like you got hit by a bus every day because you're just dealing with so much information as it's coming in. And then even for the same for people who may be discretionary from the longer term side of things, the swing to investing to even longer term, having your thoughts of why it is that you like this stock or this sector or something can help. I find in a couple places. One is to make sure that you're trading correct. You're trading based off the way that you want to. But the other thing is to make sure that sometimes sticking with things in hard times, both systems and with stocks that you like, it's important to kind of document your thought process there, right? So if you're like, okay, I have this system, it looks for pullbacks, and I'm buying things on the way down, I'm hoping for a little mean reversion on them, just journaling that over and over again, saying, hey, the market was down a whole lot this week, so of course all my mean reverting stuff got hit. Just separating those things out, I think is super important in a way that couldn't be fully systematized. So do you have any ideas other than journaling? And, did that road of thinking of what not to automate, did that end up leading you down different paths?
Um, well, there's another part. There's a couple more parts of this that I'd like to mention, and and this is probably more for the developers in our audience. Um, think about a big process that you have automated before. Oftentimes, there's a whole lot of steps involved. It can get complicated pretty quickly, even if it is automated. And it becomes big enough at some point where you think, gosh, don't touch it. It's working. Don't, don't touch it at all. We don't want to break it.
Hmm.
So that's really the point that you want to avoid. You want to make things, even when you automate stuff, that's modular in a way that's easily understood and in bite-sized chunks. And there's a tendency to, just put a whole bunch of steps together in this mashup that really you're not going to remember how it works 6 months from now. When you need to go back and change it, it's going to feel really scary. And it's the more ingrained into your trading business it is, and the more important it is, the more the scarier it's going to be to try to change it. So um, I think you want to keep that in mind, and as you develop stuff and as you automate stuff, to make sure that you're creating it in a modular way that you can change certain parts of it easily, without being without the process being too monolithic.
Yeah, and I think just going back to some of the analysis work I do on the market, I think there's a lot of advantage to be had there as well. Where when you're looking at things not to sit and to kind of hardcore systematize, you should look at also where the brain, where you need to use a human brain in a systematic process, right? So you for example were talking about reviewing your trading strategy and making sure that everything was working as it is. That's a place that you need the human brain, because if the system veers off, you need to be the one to pull it back. But also I find a lot of people can get to the point where they're automating the idea creation side of things, and they're not doing that work as well. And I think that can be almost even a bigger problem. And I've seen that happen kind of more and more, especially with the rise of AI and the videos of people saying, "Hey, I'm just going to type build me a Bollinger Band strategy." So, when we're talking about places not to add systems in, I think that's one that's very tempting, because for me anyway, it's probably the most time I take in the trading is trying to figure out new ideas. And I think that's got to be a big one that you probably even shouldn't have systems anywhere near.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's going to be a lot of uh, nuance in doing that, and you're going to have to. There's a lot of human creativity that you're going to have to bring to the table to create strategies, and the more unique they are, the better they're going to be. So that's going to take, just kind of by definition, it can't be automated. You're going to have to. You can use some automation in that process, but
Mhm.
ultimately, it's going to be you and your creativity and what makes you unique that results in a solid and a strategy with legs that lasts a long time.
Well, and it's funny. One thing that you've said to me during this podcast, and something that I've repeated to other people, that I think we could flip on its head there when we're doing this kind of thought exercise. You always say, okay, well, at the end of the day, sit down and think of what you didn't need to be there for, right? What didn't you, where did you add no value to the trade?
Yeah,
And then this is kind of the other way around, where I think you should say, okay, what can, where am I adding value? The other side of that coin. What is it that I'm doing? And in those areas, sometimes you're going to look to systematize them. But I think in many cases, if you've already gotten to the point where your trading's done automatically, if you already got a point where a lot of the mathematics and the calculations done, then you need to look, and you need to say, okay, where is it that you're adding value, or where is it that's something that you enjoy? Well, maybe you should be spending more time with the time that has been removed from systematizing certain things. That's where you kind of apply that more time. So for me, I like going through, all of my ETFs and gathering a picture of what's happening in the market that day, that week, that month. And then I find by doing that, I'm kind of spotting patterns anyway that I want to test, and giving me ideas to test. So I think you should, take the thing that Dave says, and again, flip it and say, okay, well, where can I really focus? And, and in what kind of area uh, am I adding value to my system? And how do I kind of lean into that?
yeah. It's like I often say you're never going to be the best order enterer in the world, right?
Right.
So that's an obvious thing that you should be uh, automating or trying to systematize for sure. But yeah, you're right. Like step back, think about where you really provide value
Hmm.
and what could be, what could and should be automated. There's another way I think about this, and there's different levels of automation, like we said before. And the example I mentioned before, where everything's automatically going to your journal, and how that can be good, but it turned out maybe not so good. Um, the very first thing when I get a new computer, the very first thing I install is this program called Auto Hotkey. It's like a text expander, basically a text expander. There's uh, a whole industry of applications that does basically the same thing. But you can configure hotkeys essentially, or things that you type that actually go and do different things, and you can configure that, and you can sort of write simple code to do things when you type certain uh, text sequences. So what I do for I've got, it's probably the most used application on my computer, right? I use this thing for everything. Saved me so many keystrokes over the years. Highly recommend it. It's free. One of the things I do with it is, well, first of all, I keep basically all my bookmarks are in there. So when I would need to go to my journal, I just type a quick keyword sequence. Don't even have to touch my mouse, and my browser goes to my journal. Yeah, I've got dozens of those. One of the things I think is really nice about the way I use this, and what I've started doing a few months ago, I have a keyword sequence that I type for the market open. And when I type that sequence, I have all the windows that I want to see for the market open appear in exactly the right placement and exactly the right order on my screen that I want to see. It's a very simple script to write to make that happen. So I've got one for the open, and then I've got one for the close. So I have a different set of windows that appear in just the right order when I type the one that I use for the close. Now, what that allows you to do is very modular design here. That's uh, it's not automated. It's something I do, and it's very easy for me to make changes to that over time. And what happens is, when I do want to remove a window or add a new window to my layout for the open or the close, all I need to do is modify the same script, and my same routine, my same sequence of events that I actually do during the day. None of that changes. It just changes what appears on my screen by design. So that is, I kind of think that's like almost automation, but I think it's kind of a good automation that's very easily modified, and uh, it's just a very convenient thing to be able to do.
So that might point back to some of these tech problems we're having before. That just sounds, as a Mac nerd that just wants everything to work. That sounds super complicated. But I get what you're doing there. Is you're basically saying that there's you're using automation but not fully automation, because you could make it that 10 minutes before the market closes or something, everything appears wherever you want. But the ability to sit down and do that, there's something that I think is hugely beneficial too when it comes to humans and routine, and making sure that you're doing the thing even though you don't necessarily have to do the thing kind of every day, right? Exercise same time every day, go to bed the same time every night, that kind of, there's something that's soothing and we know is good for us when it comes to routine. So in some cases, again, automate the boring stuff, automate the stuff that you don't necessarily want to do or you don't want to be there for. But some of the stuff that you do, maybe don't automate that. So for example, one thing for my personal trading as a swing trader is I use alerts for everything. And that's one thing. I'm not going to watch my algorithms put out like 30 or 40 symbols at the end of every week. I'm not going to watch through all of those, but I use alerts. And the reason I use alerts and not orders is well, a couple things, buying power and stuff like that. But I actually like to look at the market and look at the stock and kind of understand what's going on in the market before I hit a button that, again, is fully automated and it puts out the stop loss and calculates position size and does do all that stuff. But it's one thing that I think I add a little bit of value on and I enjoy. So and it kind of goes to what you're talking about with the semi-automation, right? Where, I'm not sitting there watching 30 stocks and waiting for the price to get hit and whatever. And with alerts, with TradingView and all that, it just goes directly to my phone anyway, so I could be anywhere to do it. Um, but yeah, finding those little areas where you can get as close as you want to the full automation without, and then where are the benefits. For example, putting out that many orders would eat up my buying power. I wouldn't be able to trade every position I want as big as I want. Whereas, again, just pushing the button when the time occurs does. So yeah, again, we're not coming on here saying, oh, all the podcasts we did before, forget that, go fully discretionary. We're just saying, get as close to the line as you feel comfortable for or as you want. And then while you're standing there saying, is there anything that I've kind of left the human element behind of that I should bring back? Right. I think that's a better, like your example in the beginning with the journal. I think it makes way more sense that you have done all this automation of the journal and then decide to take a step back than the other way around, if that makes any sense. Because at any point, say you have to go away for a week or something happens, you can just allow the automation and everything to run. You could, set the trades to run, you could walk away, you could do all that, and you could catch up when you get back. But I think it's just better to have as much automated as you can, and then, like we talk about, do the thought experiment of, right, what did I miss? Like what am I missing? Either I'm no longer doing this thing that I enjoyed about the trading process, or is it something that I've just kind of abandoned that I should then go back to and find some value in taking a step back?
Yeah, I think it's important to always take a step back and think about things. The other kind of downside of automating stuff is it's resource intensive. It's expensive to create that automation. And I know there's a tendency from some traders to, uh, I would say, automate stuff that the cost is just too high compared to the benefit. So, one example that comes to my mind is, um, this is sort of a low level example, but let's say you have a strategy that you've written in Python, and the 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 strategy is, time is of the essence. So you notice some examples where if you were a little bit faster, you could get some of the fills that you want to get. That so the tendency is for some developers to say, okay, well, if I ported this to C++, C++ is super fast. Um, that extra benefit, I would get some of these fills. I could probably make more money. But, I would look long and hard before you make that step. I mean, just think about, Michael, you're not a developer, but there's a big difference between a scripting language like Python and C++, because the difference is with C++, you have to compile the code. So, and then deploy that code. With Python, it's a scripting language, so they're just text files that get executed. The compiling sort of happens automatically as you run it. That slows it down, so it's not going to be as fast as C++, but it's just so much easier to write code in Python than C++. There's a whole lot of complication that comes with it. And there's a tendency of people to assume that it's going to be worth it to port it to C++, but it's not cheap to do that, and you're probably not going to get the benefit that you think you are. There's a good chance you won't. So you really, in situations like that, it's really good to really make a serious business case for yourself to do that work.
Mm,
And it might be that, like, there are strategies where that is the case. It will be worth it. But a lot of times it's not. So you really, before you go through that effort of automating it or making it significantly quote unquote significantly faster, it's good to think that through and do a cost benefit analysis to make sure it's worth it.
Well, and I like how you frame that as a business, because I think at the end of the day, it's one thing that we should always look at all aspects of our life and a little bit of a business is as you mentioned, do I spend however much to get a developer and to port it over and to spend the time and the energy focused on that. And then, yeah, I get an extra couple bucks kind of here or there when I'm correct. And that's how I think you should look at, and again, from the saying that I repeat that you gave me so much, is that you're looking at areas to take yourself out of, but at the same time you want to look at areas to kind of put yourself into and see where that automation benefit is. If you're someone like, okay, I'm going to take myself completely out of this thing that I do, and the benefits very, very small in doing it, well, there might be some benefit that you're not really thinking of to kind of keep you involved and to keep you in there. One last example I have personally is I was spending a lot of time so into kind of the back testing weeds that I had lost, I guess, my craft of analysis, right? And technical analysis, and going through all these charts and looking at the synergies of different markets. And I found I was too much in the forest, and I wasn't sitting back and looking at the trees anymore, right? I'd spend so much time in a back test or a simulated world, I forgot to study how market moves and things like that. So that's another area where you could go, okay, uh, yes, is there benefit of me systematizing all my trading? Yeah, but I got to leave some area there that forces me to say, okay, you still want to go through all these charts and do all this analysis, because there is going to be a benefit there at some point. It might not be quantifiable right now, because there just might not be any trades or anything to see. The But yeah, just having that and kind of keeping that routine, I think, is something that was huge. That for a little bit when I was going into the back tested side of things, I lost.
Yeah, it's a very common thing for people to get stuck in, I call it stuck in backtest world, where
Mm,
you're only looking at aggregate data, you're not looking at charts, you kind of get stuck there, and it's good to it's good to get out of that. It's good to recognize it and get out of it.
yeah.
Looking at charts, like you mentioned, is very valuable to be able to do. Um, and you can't look, when you're looking at a big back test, yeah, you can't look at every single chart probably.
Hmm.
So start with, uh, the best trades from the back test, the worst trades from the back test. Look at
Hmm.
those charts. Look at the outliers. But yeah, you definitely see traders get stuck in backtest world, and you know for serious data nerds, you could get stuck and stay there forever. So
Yeah.
you're totally right. You have to get out of that world and make some real trades and watch what happens in real time, and that's where you're going to get your insights. And then you can take that back with a specific goal in mind, back to back test world, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and it was, again, as someone who's right wearing multiple hats, and one of them is an analyst for long term stuff. It was really bad to get kind of that out of touch. And the other thing that you could lose there is getting out of touch just with day to day changes in the markets, and getting out of touch with new events that occurred. For example, we've got this 24-hour market that everyone seems to be getting involved in that's going. And just if you were just shut in your little world, just running your systems, running your back tests, and didn't have any exercise of, going out and doing things that uh, may not seem may not seem useful, because it's, hey, I should be spending time doing this, then yeah, you could miss big events, changes in market conditions, changes in environments, that type of thing. That it makes sense to kind of put yourself in and make sure that you're at least. So I guess the main thing that we're talking about here is just to say, eh, w- try to automate as much as you can, but you got to remember that you're the human driving the ship. So if you get completely, you're off doing something else while the ship is driving, and you've automated everything to the point where you're not paying any attention, then you're probably going to hit a rock at some point. Right.
Yeah, and when you do automate stuff, make sure you document it well, and uh, every step you should like have like an architecture diagram where you're um, all the steps are documented. So when you do go back in 6 months, when you've completely forgotten about it, and it's going to look like a completely different developer wrote the code,
Hmm.
you're going to be able to piece it back together in a much quicker way. I can't tell you the number of times where I've looked back at code that I wrote 6 months ago or more, and I'm like, who in the heck wrote this? And I think that's actually a good thing. You should be looking back at your old code and thinking, "Wow, what idiot wrote this?" Because that means you're getting better. You're getting better over time, and
Right.
that's what you want. But it is kind of hard to uh, it's hard to look at that code and not be disgusted sometimes. But I think
Well,
that if you write, if you think about that situation ahead of time when you write the code, think about you're writing this that you're yourself 6 months from now is going to be the one that has to maintain this, and you're going to feel like a different person at that point. That's who you should be writing the code for, and think about that as you write it and document the steps. That does make a big difference.
speaking about, you know, going back and seeming like it's a different person, just wait till we've been doing this for a couple years and go watch episode 1 again, because I
Ooh,
got
yeah.
suggested some of my old YouTube videos from probably 7, 8 years ago, and I watched one of them for 5 seconds, and I just wanted to go find a hole somewhere to crawl into. But yeah, it's the same as that. You see, yourself a long time ago, and you kind of hope that if you were the same person then as you are now, then probably something went wrong, right? Same with your trading journey, and same with your development, is that you should look back and say, yeah, that was stupid the way I did that, and I can do this, and it's because now you know that, unless you were lazy then, but now you know that you can do something that's way better. So again, keep yourself in the game, keep yourself kind of moving, don't automate too much. I really really like this one. I'm glad that we are back recording again. For the audience, it will just look like nothing happened, but for me and Dave, we've been fighting this tech battle for a while, so I'm glad that we've conquered it, and I'm excited to talk to you in the next one, because I am Michael Noss.
I'm Dave Mabe, and we'll see you next week on Line Your Own Pockets.